Okay. It's so good to see you all.
See you.
I'm trying to hold several books all at once. That's sort of par for the course. Oh. So you might recall that last time I said I had pondered whether or not to give you the good news first or the bad news first. Okay. So I chose, we read Therigatha's together in that wonderful translation. And tonight we'll have to talk about the founding of the nuns order and a particular text that's been so weighty throughout Buddhist history. Sunny, I guess I can just click it and get rid of it. Okay, then I can see people. I had a sign there saying meeting. So you might recall, hello, Alex, that Sunny said during you raised a question, Sunny. You said, as I'm reading through these Aryan texts, sometimes a woman seems to be a goddess and other times she's a strumpet. Well, sometimes that's called ambivalence when there seem to be these contradictory views. And so you see that term came up a number of times in the readings for tonight. So I hope to do three things tonight. One, I hope we'll do a fairly close reading of the actual Kulavagga 10 text, 6 pages or so, right? The founding of the nuns order. Then I hope we'll talk about both what Alan Sponberg said about this and what Nancy Falk said about it, because they were responding to this text. Lots of people have, because it's been a text around which turmoil swirls. You know, how can the Buddha have equivocated seemingly? How could he have ever refused to admit women? Well, I say to students, we don't know that he did. We don't know what the Buddha said. We're only able to read these texts. So we have to sort of take an intelligent look at the text to see what might have been their provenance, you know. Where did they come from? Who wrote them? Who might it have served that they were written? We have to keep in mind that much of what ends up being Buddhist ritual, and much of what ends up making up the Buddhist canon was only recorded centuries after the Buddha. Now, New Testament scholar says, well, the earliest fragments we have of what Jesus might have said, that occurs, 70 or so years after the Buddha, and actually much later. But for the Buddha, we know that his teachings were passed down orally for centuries. And the two authors I'm gonna mention tonight also have slightly differing views on when these texts might have arisen and how they impacted women and men who practice Buddhism, but they all agree. I mean, both of them agree that we don't actually know how the Buddha responded to this request. I remind students that we know that there are Buddhist nuns, however. At some point, there was a yes, right? Keep that in mind. Because the text on the founding of the nuns order has sort of conflicting views in it. Or what seems to be conflicting views. First, we don't know what the Buddha said. We actually don't know whether it was his aunt who became the first nun. She's very famous for that, Mahaprajapati. But some scholars say she would have been too old to have, or not too old to practice, but too old to have requested to become the first nun, because the Buddha may have had several nuns with him when she made the request. But so why does it end up being Mahaprajapati? Well, she's a good candidate because she's famed already in his story as the woman who raised him from the time he was 8 days old. I mean, his mother died when he's 7 days old, and Mahaprajapati, nurses him, physically nurses him and raises him. So she's a good candidate if one is considering mythologizing the occasion of the first Buddhist nun. She's a good one. Maybe she was. Maybe the dates are off. We don't know. Maybe she asked the Buddha when she was older. Maybe he hadn't ordained anyone else. But there seemed to be some storytelling, which I enjoy, right? But there seems to be some storytelling occurring, some creativity with this account of the founding. So I want us together to read it carefully. Then I want us to look at Falk's take on it, which I find very interesting, and also Sponberg's discussion of it. Both the texts are older. Did you have both? Did you have both? Oh, I'm asking about homework. Were both those texts accessible to you to read?
We had the Falk. We did have the Nancy.
You have the Falk. Did you not have the Sponberg?
I don't think so.
Okay. That's okay. I'll tell you what Sponberg says. Oh, Tikaha, that's good to know. Tikaha. So let's read these 6 pages carefully. Now, aside from the fact that there may have been some mythologizing, some embellishment, some storytelling in this text, and I can point out why as we go carefully through it. The reason we should pay attention to this text is because it's had such consequences in Buddhist history. This is the locus for the so-called 8 weighty regulations for nuns. Moreover, this is the site that's often quoted as proof that the Buddha wanted women to be subordinate to men, even in his revolutionary new order. Because it's the source that's cited for these practices, this text is extremely important. Okay. All right, this text is found in one of the Vinaya texts in this translation, English translation in the Pali Text Society, Sacred Books of the Buddhist. There are volumes on the Book of Vinaya or the Book of Discipline, monastic discipline. And in the 10th part, remember that schematic we had of the canon? You saw where Kulavagga 10 is too, right? In the first group on the left side, Vinaya. If you drop down there, you'll see Kulavagga 10. You'll see Kulavagga. There's Mahavagga and Kulavagga. That's great gathering or collection. Smaller Kulavagga, a smaller collection. And in the smaller collection of the rules, so-called monastic rules of discipline, there is a text found on the founding of the nuns order. Okay, that's in chapter 10. So it's called Kulavagga 10. Okay. the lesser. Starting off that way. In a smaller basket. The lesser division. Now, I hope you have that text that's handy, so that you can see it. Do you?
Professor, it's in the chat. So people can access it through the chat.
All good.
Do you want me to put it on the screen also?
No, I like to see people. Oh, well, I don't know. Would everybody like it on the screen? Maybe that's a better way for you to see it. I don't have to be selfish about this. Do you need to see it on the screen? I see shaking no.
No.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Oh, so I'll read. So at one time, the awakened one, the Lord, was staying among the Shakyans at Kapilavastu. Oh, this is important. Kapilavastu is the Buddha's home, his ancestral home. Oh, and some date this text from the time when the Buddha had already become enlightened, and he had gone home to take care of his father's funeral affairs. And it was then that apparently Mahaprajapati, his foster mother, approached him. Then the Gautami Prajapati, this is after the Buddha has done all the funeral things, and that's over with. Before he left Kapilavastu again, it may have been the only time he'd been back since he attained enlightenment. It may have been a second time, but at this time, then the Gautamic Prajapati the Great approached the Lord. Having greeted, she stood at a respectful distance. As she was standing at a respectful distance, the Gautamic Prajapati the Great spoke thus to the Lord. Lord, it were well that women should obtain the going forth from home into homelessness in this Dhamma, in this discipline proclaimed by the truth finder. So even though she appears there as one person, see other people. Oh, she speaks for women. Oh, she's speaking for more than herself. Whether it was Mahaprajapati or someone else, and some say it could have been his former wife that he left. There's still mystery around that. She speaks not just for herself, but for women generally. Lord, it were well that women should obtain the going forth from home into homelessness in this teaching you proclaim. To which the Buddha responds, be careful, Gautami. You know what? What does be careful mean? That's the main translation. Hold on now, hold on. I can hear my father saying, wait a minute, daughter. Sorry. What? Be careful what you're asking. And so she asked again. She asked again. And a second time. And a third time did Gautami Prajapati the Great speak thus to the Lord. Lord, it were well if women should obtain the going forth from home into homelessness in this Dhamma proclaimed by the truth finder. So as is typical of Buddhist ritual, if someone makes a request, they should make it 3 times. And then apparently you accept what answer you feel you're getting. Now, if you take refuge, you have to request it 3 times on bended knee. May I take refuge? At the foot of your teacher, may I take refuge? May I take refuge? Things are repeated in 3. So that's not out of the question that she asks him 3 times, but it's a little strange, or it seems that he's making his point clear. Be careful, Gautami. Be careful, Gautami. Be careful, Gautami. hold up, wait a minute, wait a minute. This is particularly interesting because for the first monks that the Buddha accepted, he made a very simple statement, which was come forth. Come forth. And when they took a step forward, the first 5, they apparently miraculously appeared with robes, with bowl in hand. Just by taking a step, the Buddha said, come forth, ehi pasaki, come see for yourself. Took a step, they appeared in robes. But to Gautami, he apparently didn't accede to her wishes right away. But she's tough. She's tough. Then Gautami Prajapati the Great, thinking the Lord does not allow women to go forth from home in the homelessness, afflicted, grieved, with tearful face and crying, having greeted the Lord, she departed, keeping her right side towards him. All in ritual purity as it should be done. You know, you circumambulate a stupa, keeping your right side towards it. All right, then we got a time shift. She thought he said no. So the text tells us, thinking. Gautami, thinking he was saying no, departed. Then there's a time shift. Then the Lord having stayed, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Then the Lord having stayed in Kapilavatthu for as long as he found suiting, set out on tour for Vaishali. Gradually walking on tour, he arrived at Vaishali. The Lord stayed there in Vaishali in the great grove in the gable hall. Then Gautami Prajapati the Great set out for Vaishali with several Shakyan women, and in due course approached Vaishali, the great grove, the gable hall. Then Gautami Prajapati the Great, her feet swollen, her limbs covered with dust, with tearful face and crying, stood outside the porch of the gateway. She doesn't say anything, but she follows him. If sometime during the week, you get to see Thich Nhat Hanh, the first leaf in the book, what is it? Old Path, White Clouds. He has a map there, and you can see, I was saying last time, you could see the different groupings, the 16 republics. Well, you can also see how far Kapilavatthu is from Vaishali. Here's Kapilavatthu in the north, and Vaishali is a little over 100 miles away. That's important to know. One, because people travel by foot. Yet, if Mahaprajapati was doing it, she's a lady who's been pampered, if you will. I have to watch my language because they've already got her crying, tearful faces, these women traits, right? But she's been pampered because she's part of the upper class, she was in the royal house and so forth. She's not used to walking. She's used to riding in a chariot when she goes on an outing, right? But what does she do? She, heading up a group of women, they're later going to say it was 500 Shakyan women. That just means there were a lot of women who had all apparently shaved their heads in order to look like the monks. This is one of the things about the Buddhist Sangha. It's supposed to be, from the beginning, unisex. Everybody's supposed to look the same. So Gautami and her other Shakyan women, then Gautami the Great, having had her hair cut off, forgive me, she didn't shave her own head, having had her hair cut off, having donned the saffron robes, set out for Vaishali with several Shakyan women, And in due course, they approached to where the Buddha was staying. Change of scene. Aha, a nun, Ananda, sees her standing there. Remember now that this is a whole family. These folk are connected. A nun knows who she is, right? They're all from Kapilavastu. Ananda is the Buddha's cousin. He knows Mahaprajapati. They were once all lay people. So a nun sees her standing there silently, which is what munis do, which is what monks and later nuns would do. They stand silently. That's what muni means. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni, Shakyamuni, the great Muni, the silent one. So she stood there silently, and a nun saw her. Okay, this is segment 3 of the story. Then the venerable nun saw the great Gautami standing outside the porch, her feet swollen, her limbs covered with dust, her tearful face and crying. Seeing her, he spoke thus to Gautami Prajapati the Great. Why are you, Gautami, standing here, feet swollen and so forth, and crying? It is because, honored Anand, the Lord does not allow the going forth of women from home into homelessness in this Dhamma. Well now. Ha ha. Gautami, stay here a moment until I have asked the Lord for the going forth of women from home into home. Anand hadn't thought of it before. He thought of it because he saw her standing. Oh, sorry. Oh, you got to get in the fun of the story. You know, like there's so many. He saw, he said, she said. Tigaha. First, Ananda, whose name means bliss, is known as being a notorious playboy before he became a monk. Aha! You need to know these characters. They are, you know, there are stories called apadana or avadana in the Sanskrit, apadana in the Pali. Stories of the lives of all these characters, you know, in Buddhist texts. And Ananda is known because the Buddha had to trap him, apparently, into becoming a monk. And he had to trap him as Ananda was kissing and holding on to the sari of this young woman. The Buddha, while he was visiting, maybe it was this visit, maybe not, probably not, an earlier visit, he said, "Come, my cousin, take a walk with me." And Ananda was shown apparently not wanting to leave this woman who was saying, "Don't leave, my love." And he was saying, "But that's my cousin, I have to go. I'll be right back. I'll be right back." And, you know, it's like this comedy, you know, you see, she's holding on, "Don't leave me." And he's saying, "I'll be right back. I have to," you know, courtesy says, "I have to." And the Buddha just keeps saying, "Anand, come on, take a walk with me." And well, on that walk, the Buddha whisks Anand to the highest heavens, and Anand sees all these other beautiful women, right? And the Buddha says, "Weren't you just talking to someone?" And Anand can't remember her name now that he sees all these beautiful women. And then the next second, the Buddha takes Anand to hell, where he sees, you know, bone and flesh and greens, you know, and just repugnant, disgusting women in hell. And the Buddha says again, "Weren't you, oh, you need to get back." And so Anand goes through this real heavy psychological thing. And the Buddha snaps his finger and they're back outside this woman's house. And the Buddha says to Anand, "Anand, I think I need an attendant." And Anand says, "Pick me," right? But the Buddha had to, so it's interesting that the person who becomes, according to I.B. Horner, the first real feminist in the Buddhist community is a nun. since he had been a playboy formerly. So he always speaks for women, and he always thinks of women. That's the background story to a nun. He's always thinking about women. He can't quite take it, but he is known as having always gotten along very well with all the women. So that was one of his jobs later, is he is the intermediary between any laywoman or any nun, that you have to see a nun. Oh, tikaha. So there are backstories to these characters at any rate. So a nun says, what? To Prajapati's crying there. What? Let me then go ask him. And the nun would have jumped. He always represents women. Tikaha. Well, that's a good thing. So he goes, oh. Next scene, here's a nun talking to the Buddha. He approached and he said, Lord, it would be Prajapati standing there crying. It were well, Lord, if women might obtain the going forth. And apparently the Buddha says, be careful of nuns. Ooh. Wow, really? You meant it? Be careful of nun. And a second time and a third time, the Venerable Nun said, it were well if you allowed women, be careful of nuns, of the going forth of women from home into homelessness. Then the Venerable Nun thinking, and I'm going to stop. Then a nun doesn't do what Mahaprajapati had done. He doesn't respectfully go away. A nun, now I bring to your attention, neither does she. She goes away for a time, but then she follows the Buddha more than 100 miles. So in this, we're at the bottom of page 353. Oh, be careful of none of the going forth. And then the Venerable nun thinking, the Lord does not allow for the going forth of women into his Dhamma. Suppose now I by some other method should ask him for the going forth of women. Huh. So only the men are smart enough to think of another tact. So a nun goes, he says, now, Lord, are women having gone forth on this path, are they able to follow it? Will they make progress? Are they able to realize the fruit of stream attainment, of the fruit of once returning, the fruit of non-returning, or perfection? The Buddha has to admit it. Well, a nun, the women having gone forth, are able to realize all those 4 stages. So then a nun says, he just uses reasoning, right? Well, it's not really reasoning. He says, if they're capable, and this is the woman who raised you and suckled you and nursed you, then why don't you admit her? He didn't just stick with, well, if they're capable, admit them. He said, if they're capable and she's the one that's responsible for your being here, that motherly tug, then you ought to admit her. And that apparently worked. That apparently worked for her, not for the other women that she was also asking for. Aha. So there is an exception made because she did raise him. If Lord, okay, blah, 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 blah. If a nun, Gautami Prajapati the Great, accepts 8 important rules, that may be ordination for her. Very explicit. The other women, they have to be on probation if they want to do it. And probation means their probation will watch to see how well they abide by these 8 rules. Now, what does Mahaprajapati do with the 8 rules? And what do you think about those 8 rules? That will count as ordination for her. Then, let's look at the 8. Remember what the 8 rules were. Oh, first, A nun who has been ordained even for a century must greet respectfully, rise up from her seat, salute with joined palms, do proper homage to a monk ordained but that day. This rule shall be honored, respected, revered, venerated, never to be transgressed during her life. Just like you have to think about that. What? I mean, this is a rule apparently about seniority, right? A little boy just got ordained over there, comes into the room. I'm a nun. I've been a nun for 100 years. I've been out here teaching for 100 years or 80 years. Huh? And yet I am to bow down, greet respectfully, pay proper homage to him. What do you think about that rule? It's the first of 8. Sometimes you see different listings of these 8, but this is one that usually catches people's attention. What doesn't? Yes.
I have a question about the rules in general, and that is that the Buddha doesn't explain why. I mean, he lays down 8 rules, and I would be perfectly willing to follow the 8 rules if they were explained why. Is wanting to know why something that is like of the 21st century or something of Western culture, or do you find that, wanting to know why, as opposed to just having the rules? I mean, was that must have been in Indian culture too. They were so advanced that they wanted to know why,
Okay, well, apparently, all of the Vinaya rules, I mentioned this, but I mean, only fleetingly. All of the rules, they're not just a list of rules, right? All of the rules that we have in the Vinaya, in the Buddhist canon, are embedded inside a story.
Right.
And the story is supposed to tell you why. But they really give you the occasion on which the Buddha made a certain decision. And this text is looked at the same way. Mahaprajapati wanted to become a nun. There were no other nuns. She really was determined. She followed him. She cut her hair. She dressed like the rest of the monks. She really was determined. After a nun makes his plea, the Buddha says, okay, if she'll abide by these 8 rules. Now, these rules are additional rules. The Buddha doesn't explain why. We're provided with the context from whence the rule is generated. So, special circumstance, she wants to become the first nun. Apparently, the Buddha decides there has to be, maybe it's just because they're in Indian society. Maybe it's because the Buddha is aware that it's going to be real difficult to have women in the forest in his newly founded community. What will the rest of society think? Will the rest of society respect his new Sangha? Right? Last time we were talking about the transformation psychologically these men had to go through, right? Seeing women again, whom they've had relations with, who they were married with, who were their kids, and now they have to see them and remain unattached to them. That requires change, right? Maybe the Buddha is just thinking, I've got to make the limits, that there are limits here, that in this newfound community, we observe Aryan distinctions between men and women. That's one reason. That he wants to make sure that these women he accepts into the Sangha are going to have the same protection or smothering by men as women have in larger Aryan society. Now, that's one way of taking the rules. Now, of the other rules, because I think this is one of the real damning ones that, this makes clear, however old a nun is, however revered she is to bow down to a young monk, right? That really settles the issue, right? And it's heavy. But there's some other heavier ones, seems to me. As you read through these 8, do any others stand out for you? Thanks, Sonny. Do any others stand out for you? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. A nun offending against an important rule must undergo discipline for half a month before both orders, not just the nun's order, but the monks and the nun's order. That's heavy. Monks don't have to go to the nuns, right? But nuns have to go to both. Tikaha. Then we find out that for the other nuns, there's probationary period of 2 years, right? Then here's one. A monk must not be abused or reviled in any way by a nun. Oh, that's a heavy rule. From today, admonition of monks by nuns is forbidden, but admonition of nuns by monks is not forbidden. That's heavy. Now, admonition means not only correcting. You can't correct a monk. You can't say, hey, step back now. You can't say that to a monk. A monk can say it to a nun, but a nun can't say it to a monk. Also embedded here is nuns don't teach monks. That's the biggie. Because that defined what nuns' ability to grow and stretch and, and show their stuff and real equity. Because teaching is so important in Buddhism. If nuns can't teach monks, that definitely pins down their second-class citizenship in a teaching sangha 4 times. We'll talk about it in a minute. Now, so when a nun goes back and tells Mahaprajapati these 8 rules, what does she do? She accepts them. Like a young bride puts a garland on her head, garland of flowers, so Mahaprajapati accepts these 8. Why? Question is why? What do you think? Why did she accept them so joyously? Like a young bride accepts the garland on her head, placing it on her head. Even so do I, honored a nun, accept these 8 important rules never to be transgressed. Why? All right, she wasn't in the 21st century. Okay, but why did she eagerly accept them? Why did she take them joyously?
She knew it was going to get it done.
That's what she wanted. She wanted to join. Right? He said, do this. That'll count as your ordination. She said, yippee. She got what she wanted. All right. This is not 21st century thinking, but it is. We have to step back. Westerners going to Asian countries, trying to tell Asian women what they need. Oh, I think if you work on hygiene, blah, 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 blah. Instead of listening to them, Mahaprajapati wanted him to accept women. He said, if she takes these 8, she'll be accepted. She said, thank you so much. That's important. Sonny, I see you thinking. I see you thinking.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I agree with her. I would jump at the chance. She got what she wanted. But you know what, Professor?
What?
So the Buddha so it makes perfect sense, as you explained. It's from a sociological point of view, why he laid down, why there was such a distinction. Perfect sense. What doesn't make sense is that 2,500 years later, Tibetan, when Venerable Padma, the English nun.
Yes.
Yeah, she was in a monastery with 700 other monks, and they liked her very much. And they said to her, "We like you so much. We're sure you'll come back
be reborn as a man
and be enlightened."
Yes, and so she went alone and meditated in a cave. Did 4 3-year retreats. Came out, founded a nunnery. Right, founded a nunnery.
Right.
Her nunnery. She wants her nuns to get all the teaching that the monks get, and she's pushing for that. The last time
2,500 years, and it came from and the impulse comes from a nun, from a woman, and all of these, and for 2,500 years, these men have not questioned. They took what the Buddha said as being something not sociological, but a sign of inferiority of women, and that's why they followed it for 2,500 years. Officially, maybe unofficially, many agreed.
This is one of the biggest problems I have with this text. We can point out, we will in the next few minutes, all the inconsistencies, all the reasons someone else clearly made up this text. Any kind of text critical study of this text will show it was made up probably centuries after the Buddha for a reason. And that's why we want to ask, why might somebody have made up this text? The dire thing about this text is that even when you know that, it is still quoted as a source, and it's still canonical. If we look at the scheme, it's in the canon. And I've had Western students from Wesleyan, men who went off and became monks, who have quoted those 8 rules to me, and I'm going, weren't you in class? Where the heck did you go that you think like that? That it's canonical. They can take it, they can spout it back. This text has been ruinous, I believe, you can quote me, for the welfare of women over time, because many nuns who have excelled in lots of ways and who don't have to take these 8 rules, yet hear these 8 rules recited to them. Yet hear the rules. An ordination might take 3 months. You're learning you're learning how to tuck your robes. Some anilas are here. You're learning how to tuck your robes. You're learning all the polite etiquette. You're learning You're not going to take these 8 rules. You're going to take 327 other rules, maybe. And the monks only take 260. So there's a difference there. But you're not going to take these 8. And yet every day, I'm told, by Lekshe Somo, these 8 rules are recited. You don't have to physically take them, but you have to hear them. It's like, I'm going to make you inferior. I'm going to, I don't go for it. I think the consequences of this text have been, I think this text should no longer be recited. See, that's my statement, but I'm not strong enough to do it at ordination ceremonies, even though it's canonical. Tikaha. Let's talk more about the text. So there are 8 rules. Some of you may think some of them are more damaging than others. Maha Prajapati accepts them, but not for long. she comes back. I don't know if you read that section, but I don't know if you had that section, but a couple of pages later, she comes back and she says, Lord, he says, yes. She said, it would be well if you reconsidered that seniority rule. She says that in this same text. It would be well if you reconsidered that first rule. And he says, can't happen, won't happen. In this text, that's his response. So, all right, let's go to the next page so I can start pointing out why this isn't necessarily a Buddhist text, tikaha. I don't mean that in some grandiose way. I mean, it's got portions taken from other religious traditions texts. Okay, that's important to know. The next page. So Gautami takes the 8, and after she takes them, a nun went back and told the Buddha, okay, my Prajapati accepted the 8. And that's when the Buddha makes this prediction. You know, it's like he gave her the 8 vows, she was happy, right? And then the Buddha says, oh, Anand, if women hadn't asked for this, my dharma would have lasted 1,000 years. Now it'll only last half that time. Oh, woe is me. Is that realistic? I don't think so. I mean, if he thought that his teachings would be, the length of his teachings would be cut in half, do you think he would allow for it? I don't think so. I mean, if he knew it at that time, I'm going to give her these 8 rules. She's going to become the first nun. And then my teaching is going to be cut. The length of it's going to be cut in half. I mean, would any reasonable person have done that? He's trying to establish a new teaching in India. He knew it would be problematic to accept women. But did he think it would cut the length of the teachings in half? And if so, why, crazy person, do it? If you want the Dharma to last long, don't allow it. So there are all these ins and outs, ups and downs in this text. Now, right after he says that, oh, the length of my Dharma will be cut in half. But since Anand, women have gone forth in this discipline claimed by the truth finder, now Anand, the Brahma fairy, will not last long. True Dharma will endure only 500 years. Now, what's the next thing? Oh, the next thing is this series, of similes. Even Anand, as those households which have many women and few men easily fall prey to robbers, to pot thieves. Even so, Anand, in whatever wayfaring Dhamma women and men join together to practice, that one's going to be subject to thieves. That Brahma faring will not last long. Even so, Anand, as when the disease known as mildew attacks a whole field of rice, that rice does not last long. Does that sound like the Buddha? Even so, Anand, as when the disease known as red rust, whatever that is, attacks a whole field of sugarcane, that Brahma fairy will not last long. Even Anand, as a man looking forward may build a dike to a great reservoir so that the water may not overflow. That's why I gave these 8 rules. These similes, which are not direct synonyms for women, still cast them in bad light. Still talks about it's dangerous. Still talks about women being dangerous. They spoil things. Tikaha. And lastly, he needed control for the future. That's why I built this dike, this reservoir, so the water may not overflow. That's why I set down the 8 rules. But these 4 similes, don't find that in Buddhist texts, find that in some other texts. As I've said to some students at Maitripa, I've tried to find them. I know I've seen these similes in Jain texts before, but I can't find a Jain text where they appear. So that part I'm pretty certain was lifted from a Jain text. These mildew, the robbers, the red rust. Equally so, Sponberg notes, it was Mahavir's aunt who asked to become the first Jain nun. It was the Buddha's aunt who asked to become. There are these similarities, too many, actually, to just be coincidence. Some of this stuff is lifted from other sources. Okay. Then on the next page, I guess I might be your last page, the Buddha says, I allow henceforth for monks to, I allow monks, I allow monks, nuns to be ordained by monks. So I don't have to ordain personally. This is part of the rule-making process, Sonny. I don't have to personally ordain every individual woman coming. Monks can do it. Okay. Do you think, now I'm just going to ask you, since some of you have read Fox. Nancy Falk has an interesting take on this, on the text and on the historical phases, and on why someone, whether monk or not, but probably a monk, or several monks. This text has similes and similarities that seem to be coming from other traditions. What does Falk say? We need to talk about this before our time runs out. Did anybody find her arguments convincing? The first thing she tells us, I'm not going to go through that. The first thing she tells us is, it seems from her research that nuns did very well early on, that they were in a prosperous, that their communities were prosperous. She says, the Falk article breaks down 3 historical phases. She says from the Buddha's own time, 6th century BCE, until the time of King Ashoka, which is 3rd century BCE. So those 3 centuries, Nancy Falk finds evidence that nuns were doing very well, the nuns communities. Now, I couldn't have you read everything, so I'll just put out there. If you want to read the really interesting reads from anthropologists and epigraph, I don't know how you say that. People who study writing and other material things. Gregory Chopin, he's a good one. Gregory Chopin writes books called Buddhists, Monks, and Business Matters. Another one is Bones, Stones, and Buddhist Monks. Gregory Chopin has found anthropological and archaeological evidence of thriving nuns communities. That's why you might be interested in reading his stuff. Gregory Chopin, Schopen. Okay, but Nancy Falk says she thinks from all the evidence she's seen that during the earliest centuries of Buddhism on the Indian subcontinent, nuns' orders did very well. And then after King Ashoka, after the first 3 centuries, there started to be decline. And this decline became so precipitous that later Chinese travelers into India, for example, found no evidence whatsoever of a nun's community at all. But then we're talking about 3rd century BCE till 6th and 7th century AD. What happened? She looked into it. Nancy Falk suggests the nuns were doing so well in India at a certain time that the monks' order and the nuns' order were in competition for donations. That's her big insight. She says on page 213, 211 to 213, she argues, it's an economic matter. I Ching notes the monks, their singularly poor estate, as she's talking about nuns now. As brief as it is, I Ching notes on the nun provides an important clue to the crisis in the women's order. Their singularly poorer state as compared to the monks indicates that they had problems in finding economic support. This is after thriving for a while. Hindu gods were gaining new converts, but people were turning away from Buddhism. At the top of page 213, she says, if the men's and women's communities had to compete for donations, there was no doubt that the men would capture the greater share of support. Now, she's argued this. I'm just glossing what she says. But what she says is one possible reason, what she implies is one possible reason for a text like this is to say to all possible donors, if you want to give, if you really want to support the Buddhist tradition, you should give to the monks' order. That's what the Buddha would have wanted. That's why the Buddha made clear that women were inferior to monks, that monks carry his teachings. I make it sound too easy. She makes the argument better. And then she goes back through some of the things we've said of the 8 rules, that monks could instruct nuns, but nuns could not instruct monks, was one of the most damning of the 8. These 8 rules provided that women would be permanently subordinated to men. And Sunny, your thing about the ambivalence, she says one hand gives, the other takes away. Like what we see in the short span of 6 pages in this text. Women are determined. Yeah, they're strong. Women want this teaching. Yes, they do. Can women attain it once they get it? Yes, they can. But they've got to remain subordinate to monks. Why? Because it's a dike on the future of the teaching. Why? Like you say, Sonny, why? There's no explanation for that. She calls it the case of the vanishing nuns, the fruits of ambivalence. She's saying the ambivalence in this text, Kulavagga 10. They're okay, but they're not okay. They're okay, but they're not okay. That ambivalence was intended to say, if you're going to support anybody, support the monks. And so the implication is after a text like this was spread abroad, the nuns' order lost out in the competition. The nuns' order started receiving less funding. And even at the end of her piece, she says, I was about ready to say the nuns' order had completely left the continent But as I am writing this piece, as I'm finishing up writing this piece in the last page, given the powerful, quote, given the powerful currents pulling against the nuns, I've come to wonder whether, in fact, I have not been puzzled by the wrong mystery. For it is less strange that the nuns finally came in second to the monks and laywomen than that they survived for as long as they did. And then she says, she's just heard about this grant that I Ching talked about. The grant is dated 885 AD. So that's 9th century, later than her earlier sources had told her. It was a grant to a place. Among the allocations for this very large establishment were 10 servants for the community of nuns that was housed within the monastery's precincts. So she found a late reference to a large establishment, a monastery that housed nuns. This is the way Tibetan monasteries quite often work too. Monasteries in Ladakh, for example, like Tikse, the famous ones, they have nunneries under their wing. Okay, take a breather, take a rest, because I want to go at it the way Spanberg talks about it.
Professor, may I just ask a question about the Falk piece?
Yes, please.
She says on page 220, once upon a time, I attributed these stories to misogyny. And then she says, but after many years of study, she talks about how the Buddhist laywomen come off very well in Buddhist stories in spite of, and she goes on. That sort of threw me off. This notion, I mean, you talked about the matriarchs and things, I think in the first chapter, or the chapter that we read last week in your book, but I was a little confused about the context for that with respect to the other arguments that she makes.
Well, it makes it seem as though, I think, monks are more frightened by people who are in their community than people who are supporting them. I think that's probably true. They didn't feel any threat from the laity, which supported them by giving donations. But as the Buddha said, he was building a dike against, he's controlling, I don't know if the Buddha said that at all, but the person who wrote this text says there has to be some control of those who are within our confines. So the nuns became more dangerous because they were inside. Maybe, as Falk says, they were competing.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me, that there was an economic basis, that somebody would write this text to make it clear to whom you should give your donations. And the lay people were already donors, you see. They were no threat at all. And the Buddha had some really, really wealthy lay women donors. So I think there's bite to this economic argument. And also there's bite to the idea that nuns can't teach. That really, if you're going to donate, if you want the teaching to survive, you better give to the men, because the nuns can't teach. Now, Spanberg takes a different view. He's looking at this text. He says some people call that ambivalence, contradictory views. He says, I don't think it's contradictory views. I think it's the idea that this text was written long after the Buddha's time, and it shows the different voices, the multivocality, the different strands of thinking about nuns. That's why there's some sort of positive to give, and then they take it away, and some negative ones, and some really negative ones, and some that say, oh yeah, a nun can do anything a man can do. If she enters the path, yes, of course she can. But, so Spanberg says what does he do? He gives at least 4 historical phases, and he says there are different voices going, they're not just historical phases. Let me find them. Sponberg is in the book. Ah, here it is. Oh, are you okay if I keep talking?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. In 1992, a book came out. It had been an AAR panel in 88, I think. And this book was edited by Jose Cabezon, old friend. We're all sort of the same generation. Jose studied at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with Geshe Zopa, and he went to India and he studied in Tibetan monastery. At any rate, he did a panel, and the results of that panel were several papers that were published under the title Buddhism, Sexuality, and Gender. Buddhism, Sexuality, and Gender. Came out by Sony, State University of New York, 1992. The first piece in this collection of essays is Alan Sponberg's piece. It's the longest piece in the book, and it was made the first piece because it's sort of an umbrella. It offers a way of thinking about not ambivalent views, but contradictory views. These men, like we were in the 80s, the feminists with the pink book. These men were, the liberal, they were doing stuff too. So they're taking women's sides and things. Sponberg says there were 4 different voices. And he can spot them and pick them out in this text. The first, he says, 4 distinct attitudes toward women. He says, I don't like ambivalence. I think there are 4 different voices at work here. The first he calls soteriological inclusiveness, by which he means the path, as the Buddha said, as the Buddha says in this piece, is open to all. Like when he answers a nun, yes, women can do it. Right? So there's the sense, or there's the voice that says, if you're just talking about the path, women or men makes no difference. The path is open to all. Sponberg calls that soteriological inclusiveness. Soteriological, the science, the theory of salvation or liberation. So in terms of the path that's offered, men and women can take it on. And he says, this was probably the most prevalent voice during the Buddha's time. That's why we got monks and nuns. That was a thread. That was a thread of thinking. All right. And he says the second phase, which is not so much historical, but it is. It isn't what it is what he calls institutional androcentrism. Institutional androcentrism, which means that once, during the early communities, it was fine. You have women and men out there. The Buddha has to talk to all the people who might have some qualms with it, but the Buddha is good at that. He can talk to all the people who have qualms. But once the Sangha started having fixed places, once the donors gave actual parks and actual viharas, and even though the Buddha had early said that monks and nuns, you should keep moving, you should always go and teach the Dharma that's good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Once these donors start giving parks and actual structures, monastic settlements, so that during the rainy season, the monks and nuns would have a permanent residence. Once it becomes institutionalized, that is, has structures, then he suggests Buddhism becomes more androcentric, more focused on males and the welfare of the males as opposed to the women. That's the second thread. I'm going to come back to that one. The third thread, I have so many notes here, I can't find them. Okay, the third attitude is what he calls ascetic misogyny.
Ooh,
That got heavy, didn't it?
ascetic.
Yeah, he says, quote, alongside the institutional androcentrism we have just considered, we must recognize another, even more negative attitude toward women, an attitude that often was much more aggressively hostile in its expression. In some cases, we see it, as in the Anguttara Nikaya, when Ananda asked the Buddha, "Pray, Lord, what is the reason, what is the cause why women folk neither sit in the court nor embark on business, nor reach the essence of any deed?" To which we are told, Gautama replies, "Women folk are uncontrolled, Anand. Women folk are envious, Anand. Women folk are greedy, Anand. Women folk are weak in wisdom, Anand. That is the reason, that is the cause why women folk do not sit in the court of justice, do not embark on business, do not reach the essence of deed." There are these kinds of texts. You read them in my Nuns and Benefactors, right? Sometimes these texts are just straight up misogyny. And they are, according to Sponberg, written by, become the raison d'etre of individual, not institutions, who do put men on top, but especially if individuals who I suggest in my piece are struggling.
Professor, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Misogynist sentiments go well beyond the attitude of institutional androcentrism. They are more defensively hostile in tone, and they arose in response to a different set of problems. To understand the place of these anti-feminine depictions in the Buddhist tradition, we must first look to cosmogonic myths, and well, he goes off in these cosmogonic myths. Oh, tika, not necessary. Can't read everything. I've quoted some of these passages he quotes. He quotes, for example, this one. "Monks, I see no other single form so enticing, so desirable, so intoxicating, so binding, so distracting." There you go, totally truth. "Such a hindrance to winning peace than a woman's form." Didn't mean it's not so bad on the woman. It's clearly a man having a hard time with a woman, you see. Just spit it right out. "Monks, whoever clings to a woman's form, infatuated, greedy, fettered, enslaved, enthralled, for many a long day shall grieve, snared by the charms of a woman's form." "Monks, a woman," I quoted this one, "monks, a woman when going along will stop to ensnare the heart of a man, whether standing, sitting, or lying down, laughing, talking, or singing, weeping, stricken, or dying. A woman will stop to ensnare the heart of a man. I hope not. We have better things to do." At any rate, Sponberg calls that ascetic misogyny. And then his fourth one is one it's not part of this Kulavagga discussion, because it's not early Buddhism. It is what he calls soteriological androgen. And for that, he goes to Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. But he even recognizes there that even when the goddess is praised so much, the texts are still from the point of view of a man. It's what's pleasing to a man, these dakinis, as they're described. And there hardly ever do we talk of dakas. That's the male principle. But the idea of Tantra is that we all have masculine and feminine in us right now. We all have those essences, and that the androgyny is knowing that and working with those things. In other words, that we lack nothing that we need. So, but Sponberg talks about multivocality of views or attitudes. And so he says these attitudes were like floating in the environment when a text like Kulavaga 10 was written. It's written late, and it has threads from all those different voices. That's why it seems so contradictory. Have we gone over time? Have we gone over time? I don't have time.
No, Professor, we continue until 8:30. So we have another.
We have another 20 minutes. Tika.
Yes.
Oh, about, okay. All right. My foot has a cramp here. Struggling. All right. So think of this text. Now I'm going to ask each of you, is any of this changing any of your minds? You know, if I ask the question, here I'm asking the question. Who would write a text like this? To what end? What did they hope to accomplish? What do you think? What did the author of this text, who brings in snippets from other texts, those similes for sure, the idea that it was the Buddha's aunt who became the first nun. Some say it was Yashoda, some say it was other women, right? We've read the Therigattas. We know that women excelled at teaching, at least teaching other women. One of those nuns in Therigatta taught her son. Another taught her husband. Those are the only cases. Those men were really close to them. Nuns generally, don't teach other men. Now let me tell you the stories. That's what I was going to say. I had to come back to that. One story. Okay. You think about who you think wrote this text. Tika. So I went to visit Geshe Rabten. Geshe Rabten, who used to live in Dharamsala and with whom I took vows, or I took refuge. And he wasn't living in Recon, Switzerland. No, he wasn't in Recon. He was in just above Lake Geneva. All the monks were in Recon when I got there. All right, I arrived trying to see Geshe Rabten at this monastery called Tarpaling. In Europe at the time, it was the one place where men, where Westerners, take it back, where Westerners could undergo strict Tibetan training. It was the one place in Europe. Tarpaling it was called. You're shaking your head, Anila. Tika. Then, so I went, it's up above Lake Geneva, you take the funicular, beautiful, going up. And I got out of the taxi, and all these monks came running. Oh, Professor Willis, you have arrived. They wanted to take my luggage. Let me help you. But that was nice, okay. Is Geshe Rabten here? Oh, Geshe Rabten's at Recon. His Holiness is going to come later. All the monks from here, they've gone, Oh, no, I just missed them. Tika, well, some of us are here. Some of the students are here. Okay. So these were Westerners, some of whom had been students of mine at Wesleyan. They're in training, they're in robes. They didn't go to Recon. They're grabbing my bags. And they showed me to my room. Okay. Then later that afternoon or early the next morning, these Western nuns come to me, too. There are apparently 4 Western nuns living there. And the day or two before, they had just been kicked out by the other Western Tibetan monks. The reason? The donations have fallen off a little. We can't support you nuns. Kicked them out. 4 women who had been living at Tarpaling, 4 nuns, had to fend all of a sudden You have to find jobs, you have to pay rent somewhere. They had kicked them out. The nuns wanted me to talk to Geshe Rabten, right? I'm an outsider. I'm sort of an academic. I know Geshe Rabten a long time. Please, we can't ourselves tell Geshe Rabten what the monks have done to us. I'm going like, why heck not? Because that's not done. That's not how you approach the abbot. You have to go through an intermediary, a monk intermediary. Talk about a catch-22. It's like Geshe Rabten doesn't know these folk kicked you guys out. No, he doesn't know. Okay. So then I go back, Geshe Rabten isn't even there. I go back to some of the Western monks. And I say, what's going on? They say to me, they told me about the donation thing was slacking off, so they couldn't keep everything on. I'm going, yeah, but you're all in the same community, all in the same boat. Why did you kick the women out? Okay, the nuns out, And then one of them said, you remember the 8 rules. And I said, what? It was like my head was going to explode. I didn't teach you that, so you quoted back to me, you dodo. But he quoted it back to me. It was like how quickly, you step into those roles and start to act that way. This text, I think, is a dangerous text. It's canonical. It still has weight, even though it's fraught with, if you really read it, it's too contradictory, it's too ambivalent, it's too much like other texts, it's too syncretic, we would say, too made up, too many parts to be authored by one person recounting what the Buddha said. It's just not possible. And it still has consequences. Sadly. So that even when people don't quote you, as the former monk Pandey, some of you might know him, might be old enough to know Pandey, back in California, Pandey told His Holiness that I loved being a monk until I had to seat everyone for an official occasion. When it became my duty to seat the monks and the nuns, and I was told to be sure that a monk who had been ordained but that day sat higher than nuns, no matter how long they'd been nuns. He said I couldn't stay after that. I just couldn't stay. So Pandey disrobed. And then he told His Holiness that was why, with tears in his eyes. He said, we cannot keep following this. We cannot keep following these kind of whatever you want to characterize them as, texts which make these divisions, these stark divisions between people. If you want to see that, you can see the film of the early meeting in Dharamsala of the Western monastics speaking with His Holiness. I think it's called The Spirit of Awakening. And the last story, and then I'll stop really, is I saw, of course I know a cave in the snow. Why can we not think of her name? Pema, who is now called what? Jetsuma.
Justin Palmo?
Justin Palmo, yes. Justin Palmo. I saw at Vicky McKenzie's flat. I was giving a teaching in London, and Vicky McKenzie came, who did The Boy Lama, and who later did the excellent book on Beatty. And okay. So she came to my talk. The first time I'd met her was years ago in London. And she said, are you going to be around, Jan? Come over to my flat. So I went over her flat. And she said, Tetsuma was going to come the next day and we'd have tea or something. So I got to Vicky's early, and then the doorbell rang. And when she opened the door, in comes Anipamo like this. I thought, what just happened? She said, oh, some of these men are so stubborn. Yep, that's her. But she can give as good as she gets. Oh, yeah. So, are there some other reasons that we might not have mentioned? Certainly, I might not have mentioned in this talk. What other explanations can you come up? Is there a reading in which the Buddha might have said this? What this text says? Can you think of some reasons? Are there other explanations for a source? Your writing assignment, you're gonna have to answer. So think about it. Come on now. Any other reason you can see why the Buddha might have so-called hesitated about admitting women? Pam.
I'm in the article by Falk, or the chapter, she refers to the fact that women not having children was a factor. I don't know if she's referring to this, but I just wonder if the Buddha just trying to come up with something, because it's so hard for me to understand that maybe the threat of not having children or something. I don't know, but that women are the only ones who can have children. And then I'm thinking also in your chapter, you talk about, there's one of the stories, the fourth story, you say the infertility was a greater shame than the young man's apostasy, and when you're referring to the story of the young nuns, the man who impregnates the nun. And I'm just trying to think about how all of this fertility might have influenced this. But I don't know.
I think Fox says it to say that the Buddha lived and practiced in this milieu of Aryan society, where it was a woman's role, right, to have children and to take care of a husband. Yeah. And so that he may have just, he was an Aryan man. And so I think, okay, he might have thought of that, but I don't think he thought his new community would take away all the women.
Yeah.
Some people have argued that the Buddha might have hesitated because, all right, I mentioned, I don't know, at some point, there were supposed to have been 64 great teachers during the Buddha's time. And only 2 have survived to the present day. One is Mahavira and the Jains, and the other is the Buddha and Buddhism. So those others fell away. And it's said that Mahavira allowed for nuns into his community. There was great uproar. Why? Well, one of the reasons was his practitioners went around naked, right? And if he was going to allow women, how could he allow that, right? He can't have naked women and men together in the forest as they would have been, right? So that's why there are 2 sets of giants. There's sky-clad, the naked wanderers, sky-clad Digambara, and Shvetambara, the white-clad ones. So you see Jain women wearing white saris. So he came up with that solution. Women could join. They could mark themselves as Jains by wearing only white, right? They had given up on color and all the things that women might fancy, right? So they just wore, but that was a solution. So there are 2 sects of Jains. There's Digambaras and Shvetambaras. And there's still philosophical conflict sometimes between the 2. Because men can also become Shvetambaras. But the staunch Jain practitioners, they're just the sky-clad ones, right? But the Buddha had seen, because Mahavir apparently did this before the Buddha was asked to have nuns. The Buddha had seen, to answer your question, Pam, he had seen that when Mahavir allowed for it, lots of women rushed to join. Lots of women apparently left the household willingly and fled to Mahavir. So I suppose the Buddha thought it might happen to him too. I think it's interesting to see in the text itself, you can't have it both ways, but the text itself says he didn't say yes to Mahaprajapati when he was at Kapilavastu. But after she came, after she walked all that way, which some people have speculated on the amount of time that would have taken. So they said at least he had those 8 weeks or so to think about it. So when she asked the second time, maybe he had done some thinking. And he said, well, I'll make these 8 rules. I'll make some rules. We don't know what rules. And if she takes those, maybe that'll be a way. That's one way of taking the text. He thought about it. Right. But still, he didn't say to Mahaprajapati. He said to a nun. He doesn't talk to Mahaprajapati anymore in the text until after she's a nun, right? And she comes back and says, think about the seniority rule. But he doesn't talk anymore to her. So there's all these shifting things happening. But I think when Falk says that, she's saying, you know, he was in the Aryan society, and he knew that. And he knew that a woman's role was to do this. But heck, he was revolutionary. He had said, I'm going to found this community. Already that was going against the grain of Aryans. Aryan society said, you do this, you study, you become a householder, you become a hermit, then you can seek your, salvation. The Buddha said anybody from any caste can come at any time. He had young people and old people. He was breaking all sorts of norms. So when the woman came, this was the last one, maybe this is the biggest one, but he was already doing it. I want us not to forget that there are Buddhist nuns, right? We don't actually know what the Buddha said to anyone, whether it's Mahaprajapati or not, but we do know there were nuns allowed at some point early on in Buddhist history, because there are artifacts in it. Chopin talks about a nunnery that had a little bar going on. It actually had a little bar on the outskirts of town, making money. Yeah, the nuns weren't drinking, but they were furnishing wine. Chopin says he's got the little artifact chips. Nuns were creative. That's being the head. Anyway, so this text, the reason I put so much emphasis on it is because it still plays. Those Wesleyan students, Pende, it's still drawn upon. If people would stop talking about it, I'd say good. But I think people should know about it, get ready to respond to it, because it's had consequences. It's had serious consequences.
Professor, there's a question from Yeshanima and also from Ana Lopez. So Yeshanima, you want to start? You have a question?
Yes, it's not a question, but I think my analogy why Buddha actually maybe didn't say anything, or I think kept quiet, is because during that time, I think a lot of they would do the Patyatra, walking meditation or walking teaching, and then woman would have I think that time didn't have a sanitary pads for menstruating women, and women frequently menstruate every month, and for them to, I think, continuously walk and do the teaching, or I don't know at that time what was the situation, but I think one of the reason is also that for that woman would be a little bit difficult because
because biologically it would have been different, difficult for a woman to practice this mendicant life.
Yes.
Okay, good one.
And then the next one is also the, there could be mix up, let's say there will be like automatically attraction or have some kind of bonding, like infatuation between men and women, and probably that would distract
Yes.
monks. So probably it would like disrupts their kind of a discipline. Probably those are maybe some reasons, but I'm not quite sure. It's just my thinking.
Absolutely. I think that's a great, I think the Buddha must have considered that he's trying so hard to found this intentional community, and he's admitted only men. Now, if he's going to admit women and he's trying to have the men change their attitudes because become less attached to the female form, it's going to be difficult if he admits women. That's true. That's absolutely one of the things that might have crossed his mind. How is he going to keep control of the men if he allows women to get near to them again after he's just been teaching non-attachment? Yes, I think that's good reason. I certainly think he considered that. Thank you, Ishi.
And Professor Ana Lopez has a question.
Yes, thank you, Sunny, and thank you very much, Professor.
My
So
pleasure.
I've been thinking a lot about like the impact of this text, but I'm wondering like if that impact has been different among different traditions, and like I'm also wondering about like the tensions or relation this text might have, for example, with like the female energies and deities within Buddhism. Like how can what dialogue would like this kind of text have with like the dakinis or like the female energies and Buddhas? And I just wanted to ask you about that, like what happens there,
I think that's really, I think the last question is really too difficult for me to try to answer about how that relates to tantric practice. And I don't think it was a text ever intended. It's intended for an early monastic community. But the first part of what you were saying, the first part, that's good. Can you say again what you started to say about that?
Yeah, I think like both are in a way related, because I was thinking like how does this text have impacted different traditions?
Yes.
Different
Okay.
traditions.
Yeah. Well, this is the text that Paula Arai is a Harvard graduate. She teaches, I think she might still be at Vanderbilt, but she's written about Soto Zen nuns. She's lived with the nuns in Japan and so forth. And she talks about the fact that because of this text, those Japanese Zen nuns, and they're Mahayana, right? This is a Theravadan text. I didn't say that at any point. This is early Theravadan text in Pali, right? But she says, just based on this text, the Japanese nuns celebrate Anand. They celebrate a nun 3 months of the year. Why? Because if it hadn't been for him, according to this text, there wouldn't be nuns. So that's a positive way to look at it, to use this text. They're saying they praise Anand for the fact that he sued for nuns to be admitted. So she says, she talks about these rituals, these festivals that go on for 3 months in Zen places where they're, and I just think it's funny because, I think it's, it's sacred and that's special, but a nun's character as being the playboy, it tickles me that he's celebrated as being a feminist.
Right.
I think that's fun. And Leslie, you want other people want to say anything? I think that's great. Thank you for asking a question, Anna.
I just want to say, I think I've never considered the fact that the Buddha never said that. I never, I always thought that he said it, you know. So this is news to me, but it makes sense. I mean, when you study the Christian texts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all written later, you know, everything that that Jesus said, we don't know what Jesus said. We just know what we remember, right? Or whatever they wrote down. And I feel the same way about the Buddhist text, of course, because they wrote it down. You're saying this text came 300 years later, or how much later?
At least, probably 600, 700 years later.
Wow. Yeah. So I feel like it was.
This is a late addition to the canon, but it's there and it's canonical, and people take it as being the truth.
I know. And when you were asking, well, who would write something like this, I was thinking the Vatican, the bureaucrats, you know, those folks who are busy making up the big rules that everybody's going to have to follow all over the world. You know,
religions become institutionalized, and we lose the religion. We lose the spirit of them. They become institutionalized, and there are all these rules, and we sort of don't question where those rules came from. But they're really written by human beings.
I know,
who
haven't got very highly realized.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
And but I've always thought when I read that, and when I've been confronted by all these more rules for nuns and monks, all that, I feel like the Buddha was protecting us. The Buddha was really protecting women any way he could figure out how to do it with these rules. And I think about that like you're saying, sociologically, anthropologically, they were in that kind of society. The women were just nothing, and like we studied earlier, totally unprotected. You know, if you didn't have a man around, then you were totally unprotected. You were in danger all the time. So the Buddha was really setting up a protection, and he knew that. I think he knew that he had to set rules like that everybody else would say, "Oh, look how respectful those nuns are. Look how polite they are. Look how good they are." You know, all this stuff to elevate the nuns in the society's view, to elevate women, because it was a whole new class of women. I mean,
it's a whole new lifestyle,
right?
And they're going to be very scrutinized,
right? And so make them be careful. When he says be careful, I understood. Yeah, be careful. I'm always, I'm thinking, and so much of this is totally contemporary to me. Nuns are, we're still in competition with monks for support. That's going on all over the world. And I live in the South. I feel very unprotected. You know, it's the same thing here in Arkansas with men. You know, it's kind of there's women living alone out in the woods, but not very many. And the locals think that they're pretty weird. You know, really. So I feel like the whole men thing and the respect for men and all that, that's still very much alive, very much. And I'm always very cautious about the whole thing because anything can happen to women, really. I can get surrounded any time, you know. So I feel like, okay, the Buddha's protecting me with this stuff. He's,
that's a good way to take it. That's a good way to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, there's a saying that somebody says, "Oh, that was a good thing you did," and you say, "You're half right." It probably is good somewhere, but I wasn't me doing it, and all that. You accede to it. Yep, that's at least half right. I think that's a good response. That the Buddha that we know was doing it to take care of those women, right? Yeah. And society may have required this. It might not require that in our thinking today.
Right.
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 Those students don't need to still be thinking that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Great. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you. Yes, Sheila.
Well, just listening to all this today, it just seems so contemporary. I mean, there's still so much sexism. We're still fighting it all the time. Yeah. And to think of it starting way back then and still being issues today is really amazing.
All right. Don't forget what we read last week. Those Therigattas are there too.
Yeah, they blew my mind.
Yeah. Those women, soteriological inclusiveness. When those women were given a path, they tread it, man, they walked it right up to the end. You know? And the messages they share with us still ring true. Right? You can't deny that. You can't, I think one cannot deny those anyas ring true today. And that's what Maddie did. He brought them into the present. Yeah. Can't deny that. The Buddha did something quite revolutionary. He allowed women to join him in his Sangha. We don't know the exact circumstances. We don't know exactly what he said. We don't know exactly who was the first. But there are Buddhist nuns today. And that's only because at some point, Buddhist monks or the Buddha himself said, this path is open to all. We can remember that. All right, we can still have problems with this one particular text, but that nuns exist, that's a fact. We should celebrate that. Yeah.
And teachers today are still Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche ordained women, you know, they right along with men. The teachers we know, Geshe Zopa, they ordained us.
Right.
And they're still doing it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's still going on.
And Professor, I think that, you know, if we examine the role of women in Buddhism and we, you know, work with that, I think that that goes a long way towards Buddhism grappling with inequalities in all other areas, like inequalities of race, ethnicity, other religions, you know, that kind of thing. So you know, grappling with women's status in Buddhism goes far beyond just women. It's not like we're very parochial. We just want what we want. It's like equality for all.
Yes. Now, what can we do about all those ills, those inequities? That's the biggie. Oh, but you're right. If you center, you could center race, you could center women, you could, you know, you take one of these issues and spin it out, you know. That's what intersectionality is about, right? You touch one and it's connected. And the Buddha, it's time for us to sort of end, but the one thing that the Buddha, it said, in the Buddha's enlightenment, you know, we don't know what happened then, but all the mythic layers say that in the different watches of the night, that in the first watch of the night, the Buddha saw the comings and goings. He saw the various lifetimes, and so he could tell whether his former teachers were alive or not, you know. And then he saw with the divine eye, he could see future, past, blah, blah, blah. And then on the final watch of the night, what did he see? Dependent origination. Dependent origination and shunyata, emptiness, selflessness. Oh, that had never been taught before by a major religious tradition. So that's new. That's new. As they say in Dutch, that's new, and it goes, Anyway, that's the heart of the teaching. And I think that doctrine, which is also about interconnectedness, makes that point, Sunny, that's what's really original to Buddhism, is that you touch one thing and it's connected to all these others. And as you say, one thing can be an entree into many. Yeah.
Professor, before we end, you said there's an assignment for next week?
Thank you so much. There's an assignment for next week. Sunny, I already I sent you an email, said, could you send it to everybody individually? The assignment is, it asks the question. It asks the question, did the Buddha hesitate or not? What do you think? And then use one. I thought you had seen both sources. Use in your analysis either Spanberg or Falk. Right. So I want you to touch on. So you guys use some of Falk too. Write a page. Give your opinion. You might. I don't know what you're going to say. You might say we don't know. But the question is, did the Buddha hesitate to allow women into his Sangha? Use Spanberg or Falk as part of your response.
Professor, can you spell Spanberg? What that?
You can find it online. SPONBERG.
Thank you.
Alan. Is it Alan? Yeah, it's ALAN, I think. Yes, ALAN, last name SPONBERG. And if you type in Alan Spanberg and attitudes, this piece should come up.
Attitudes?
Huh?
Did you say attitudes? Is that the name of the article?
Attitudes, yeah.
Thank you.
Attitudes towards women and the feminine in early Buddhism. I want to recommend to you, if you don't know this book, The Hidden Lamp, you might enjoy it. The Hidden Lamp. It's edited by Florence Caplow and Susan Moon, so we get some Zen women here. They've put together 2,500 years of stories of awakened women. And they do it by having the story and then asking a modern day scholar or practitioner to comment on that story. So in each case, they bring it up to the present day and comment on it. I just want to recommend it. It's a different way of hearing women's voices talking about Buddhism. We have one more class. And for that class, you're to read Christine Toomey, right? Christine Toomey's book, In Search of Buddha's Daughters. It also has another name, depending upon whether you got the British edition or the American edition, but it's Christine Toomey. And I'd like to tell everybody that unlike we do in America, in Britain, they make trailers for their books. So if you Google Christine Toomey, you'll get a 2-minute and 12-second trailer in which you'll see a lot of Buddhist nuns and Buddhist women practicing. 2 minutes, 12 seconds. Just Google it. Christine Toomey's In Search of.
How do you spell Toomey?
Toomey.
M-E-Y. Okay, thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It's always great to see you guys. Is it clear? Is the assignment clear? Sonny, you can send it out anyway. I sent it in an email, just forward it to everyone. I didn't know whether people wanted me to have their emails or whether you wanted to have each other emails. So Sonny's been handling that. Okay.
I'll email everybody.
All right. Have a great week. Take care of your health.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Willis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
How do I get my email in to Sunny?
I can send it to her.
And I'd like Professor
Oh, you get your
Willis's-
email to me by
I
sending
sent,
the
yes.
assignment, you mean?
Oh, I send the assignment to you.
Yes, you send the assignment to me at jwillis
Uh-huh.
at Agnes Scott.
My gosh.
Sunny, will you put that in the homework?
AGNESSCOTT.edu.
Professor,
And you might add that to
goodness.
the homework.
Pardon?
What
Professor,
a place to teach revolutionary ideas. I know that school from my relatives.
Is that right? Okay. Well, yeah, it's fun.
Professor, is there a time that you want the essays returned?
Oh,
by?
yes, thank you.
Put that in the email.
Let's make it soon, huh? I don't know, I don't want to rush people, but I need to get it so they can read for next time. So let me look at our calendar. This is Tuesday, right? Let's make them do Friday.
Yeah,
We're
okay,
gonna have a
Friday,
good weekend.
right.
And Friday is the
And Sunny, I think you should put their email, put Professor Willis's email, and remind people to put their name on their papers, like she
yes,
suggested
right.
last time.
remind them to put their name on the paper. That took me forever to go to the email, figure out who had written the story, go back to the email, lose the name.
Yeah.
So we're gonna say they're due on the 23rd by 4 p.m.
Okie doke.
And please put your name on the paper.
Okay, I definitely will include that.
Oh, that's so helpful.
And your email address again.
J. Willis?
I have it. I'll include it in the email.
Okay,
Yeah.
at agnescott.edu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Amy.
Thank you for letting me in.
It's okie dokie. Apparently I showed you this picture, right?
Yeah, I have that picture in my living room.
Oh, good.
They gave me.
Good, good. Glad to know.
And if you hang on 1 second, just 1 second, I showed you this picture.
Oh, His
Wait a minute.
Holiness. Oh, so nice. Oh, nice one.
And then there's another one.
Oh, nice one. Oh, when was that?
I believe it was at the Parliament. It was in 1993 at the Parliament of World Religions.
So nice one. I really like the top one. Is there a way to have that copy?
Yeah, I have a copy. I'll send it to you.
Oh,
But how can I send it to you?
wonderful. Thank
But
you.
I don't know whether it's a copy of this one or this one. I'm not sure. I have one is, I think it's, you want the top one. I think
The
it's
top one.
a copy
Yes.
of the bottom.
You could
But-
probably take a picture and send it to her.
The
Take a
top
picture.
one. Yes, you could. Yes, the top one.
But
Thank
you
you
can
so much.
see the joy in sharing the texts.
Yeah. I put up a new one of His Holiness. Someone sent me this one. It's
Oh my goodness.
around his birthday time and in Dharamsala, and close up, it looks like he's walking towards you and about to say hello. It's so sweet. So sweet. So please do send it, Amy. That's precious.
I
Well,
will.
thank you. And thank you, Sunny, as always, for your help. I appreciate it. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Nice. Can I get the folk?
The Falk reading?
Folk
That's
reading?
on the syllabus.
It's on the syllabus, so I have everything I need.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Good night.
Amy, did you join late or something? Or you've been
I
here?
just joined just
Okay.
tonight.
So, okay, so, you know, let me definitely go to the website. So you have the whatchamacallit, you
Sheila sent me the
password for
oh,
that
maybe I have to check it. I wasn't able to check it before.
okay,
So-
I'm sure she did, but just in but here, let me send you I'll put this link in the chat. And
I
then,
can't get it from the chat. I need it from email
okay,
because I'm on an iPad and it doesn't, I can't do that.
Right.
It doesn't, I don't think.
okay.
Thank you.
What's your email?
Amy, AMY, KRANTZ
Yes,
@gmail.com.
okay. So this is the link to the syllabus. It's an excellent syllabus. And so password, if you need it, the password is woman,
Woman,
plural. I'm sending it now.
women,
W-O-M.
WOMEN.
Yes, I just sent it to you.
Good, thank you. Oh yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, what a lovely experience.
This has been an amazing course. Amazing, because Professor Willis has, you know, so much background knowledge. Like every time she brings up a topic, she'll be able to, you know, her own stories, like that incredible story of the
Of
monks-
Pende.
Yeah, the monks and the nuns, right?
Yeah.
Where the four nuns were kicked.
Yeah. And
They were
also of
kicked.
Pende.
Yeah, what was that about Pende? I didn't.
He disrobed because
Oh.
of seating because of how he was in charge of seating people at a teaching, I think, with His Holiness and how they should be seated.
What's his first name?
I think it's Tupten Pende.
Okay, because I don't know, you know, I don't know the name.
It may be the same Tupten Pende who's teaching here at Shantideva.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. But that's
I'm
Stefan.
thinking it is.
His name is Stefan Pende.
Oh no, it's Tupten Pende, this one.
Okay, well, could Stefan?
No, it's not. Maybe it's not Stefan Pende. He didn't look like Pende to me. I met him a long time ago, but I've kind of forgotten what he looked like. So anyway.
Stefan has a German accent. You know, it's hard to, you know.
I don't know where Tupten Pende was from. I have a feeling he was American, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's such a wonderful story, you know, itself.
Yeah.
So, like I said, she like every time.
He was a Lama Zopa monk.
Ah, okay, interesting.
Long time ago, yeah.
So this course has been like that, you know. She keeps pulling in all this great information, you know, stuff that makes you understand.
Is it recorded? Is it recorded?
It is recorded, and on that link there, that has the syllabus. It also includes classes 1 and 2, and in a few days, today's class will be uploaded. So that'll be 3. So eventually all 4 will be included. And they're also on YouTube. So I think someone said after a few months, Shantideva clears from its data, you know, you can't get into previous sessions, you know, like a year old or something. They're no longer there, but they are on YouTube and they are accessible forever.
How, under Shantideva Buddhist Center, or how do I access it on Zoom?
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
For YouTube, I would just go to YouTube and Google the date, the name, Professor Willis.
I won't know the date. It's not Professor Willis I'm thinking of, but I would like to access the teachings of Geshe Tenle's teachings.
Okay, so just go to YouTube and actually, I
They
don't
were
know.
over a year ago, at least.
Yeah,
They were.
exactly. So they might not be on Shantideva website. They might be. I'm not exactly sure what their format is. I think how often they delete, to make room for new. But if they're not on the Shantideva website, then go to YouTube and just, Google put in Google as much information as you have, like Geshe Tenle, Shantideva Center, June 2020, whatever you have, and something like that, and YouTube, it should bring something up,
I'll try. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I have to figure out how to take a picture of this and send it.
For that, you could just take it to Staples. Where are you? Are you in New
I can
York?
go to FedEx. Yeah.
Yeah, for a photographic quality, a good quality copy, and they're just, money. People who forge dollar bill, dollars. They use copies. Copies are so good today. The technology. So if you give them something, they'll give you back something that looks just like the original.
Okay, good. I'll take this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So did you see who it was? It was the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Two
I
great
was almost at that meeting. I chaired a panel at the Parliament of women as engaged Buddhists, and I knew about the meeting, and it was to security. I couldn't go because of security, but I was aware of that meeting, and that's how I got the photographs. But
it's really wonderful, to kind of separate Buddhism and the Dharma path from society. The society that it grows up in is so. I think it's like so important, because if not, then we get results like Kulavagga 10, which is what she was talking about, the eight rules, right? Which are so much against the spirit of what the Buddha taught that it just throws you completely off balance. So if we can separate the two.
But the whole Tibetan society is so it's such a rigid class society, and people don't know that.
Yeah.
It's as rigid in Nepal, and Tibetan society are every bit as rigid as Indian class society.
Right.
And so to this day, I'm not talking about what you were reading about, but to this day. So I realized I was at points I was yawning because I was feeling so upset about these rules. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And we're so lucky we have the first Geshe-man now who's teaching online, right? And the Nuns project brought, there are many nuns now who are becoming Geshes.
Right.
So it's just happening, it's, and of course it's Annie Tenzin Palmo who's with Annie Lobsang Dechen and the Dalai Lama's sister-in-law are spearheading that.
Yeah. That's very revolutionary. That's to have women, when in society, not in Christianity, is never equal. not in Hinduism, never equal. I mean, what society had an equal status of women and men? And maybe there were some, maybe the priests.
But what's interesting about the Tibet, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was saying pre-Aryan, where the Indus Valley civilizations, and there were some civilizations in North America that where there seems to have been equal status, truly equal societies. But that's
among the Native Americans in North America?
Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, you know, the founding fathers took a lot of their concepts about equality from the Native American tribes, because, you know, Europe didn't have
But they didn't allow equality with women, but they did. But the Native Americans did?
Yes.
I did.
Yeah. From what I've read, like, for example, in the Northeastern tribes, whereas you had the men were war chiefs, the women were above, were
Medicine women.
The women were part of the council that decided whether or not they were going to have war. So it wasn't like the men on top deciding we're going to war. The men fought, but the women decided whether or not there was going to be a war.
Wow, which societies, which groups?
I know that only vaguely, but generally, I know it from the Northeastern tribes, the woodland Indians, is what they're known as, you know, and that's vaguely the Northeast, you know, the Iroquois Confederacy and so forth. I mean, the founding fathers got so many of their ideas from the Indian tribes.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, you've heard that, right? That you know.
And also many medicine women.
Mm-hmm.
There were medicine women as well as medicine men.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I personally know a medicine woman who's now passed, but the Ojibwe medicine woman. Okay. So I'm just assuming there are other medicine women, but
right.
But I don't know for sure.
Equal footing from, you know, brothers and sisters together, you know, men and women together, you know, we're kind of like a lot more equality. So, but I was saying that apart from isolated societies, it's been basically, you know, all societies you know, in the Western tradition, in the Eastern tradition, Chinese, Japanese, for sure, you know, Indian, they're all male, very, very, very male dominated. And so it would be very revolutionary for Buddhism to come out finally and say, you know, at the forefront of saying that women are, you know, hold an equal, should have an equal, we need to make women equal to men in our institutions. You know what I mean?
Well, His Holiness is doing a good job.
Exactly.
But it's amazing how much Annie Lobsang-Dechen is a personal friend of mine. And so I know a lot about how the fights have been with the conservative Rinpoches in the Gelugpa tradition, particularly. And there's such a fight back against it.
Yeah, but, so it's especially in the Gelugpa. What about the Kagyu and the Nyingma? Not so much?
Well, it's the Geshes, the push for women Geshes is in the Gelugpa tradition, and also the push for the full ordination of women is in the Gelugpa tradition. I'm not aware that it's in any of the other, I don't know. But what I do know is in the Sakya tradition, a friend of mine just wrote a book about Sakya women, and it's a wonderful book. I show it to you. Yeah. It's an amazing book, and it describes the role of women in the Sakyas. And they have a very, they have a lot of, they have a lot of power in that some men have accepted them as teachers, which is
right, equal voices. It's not more power than men, but equal voices.
this one. Wait a
Let me
minute.
see. I can't see it.
I know. I don't know how to, here, can you see? It's
No,
backwards.
Sakya Jatsunmas. Okay.
By Elizabeth, here, it's Elizabeth Bernard.
Okay.
And it's amazing. It's coming out. It's out of print now. It was just published.
Okay.
And you know who Sakya Trichen is? Sakya Treason, at the head of the Sakyas.
Okay.
Was the head. His sons are now, but he's called Sakya Trichen now. Before it was Sakya Treason. And his sister is in this as one of the Jetsumas, but he was very much behind the writing of this book, and she's a student of his and of Jetsun Kushala, who is his sister. But it's a wonderful book. I mean, you'll enjoy that, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Did Professor Willis mention it?
I'm not that I recall.
Did she say anything about the Sakyas? She didn't.
No, she hasn't been. She said, she's been talking about
prior societies.
No, she's been talking about the early Buddhism. That's what most of this course has been centered on, early Buddhism. So that's why Kulavagga 10, chapter 10 is she's talking about, and she's talking about the what is it, the Theragatha, where the women. Did you? Oh, here's the book. Do you know this?
Oh, no. Oh, I would love that. How do I get that? Is Amazon?
I got it off Amazon.
How much? Expensive?
Let me see.
Is that necessary for me to?
It's one of the required readings. Let me see. First, I'm getting it now.
Okay, I'll have my daughter write. I won't get it in time for the last class.
It's expensive. It's $16.95.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Okay.
But it sounds wonderful. The poem's good. Are you enjoying them?
They're more than good. They're mind-blowing.
Really?
Yeah, they're short. Oh, here's one. Why stay here in your little dungeon? If you really want to be free, make every thought a thought of freedom. Break your chains, tear down the walls, then walk the world a free woman.
Wow.
Or rest my heart, wrapped in these simple robes you sewed yourself, like a pot of herbs left cooking overnight, that which was boiling has boiled away. That which was on fire has all turned to ash. I mean, they're very they're well
They're powerful.
Very powerful. Very powerful, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
It says the first free women. So I think somewhere I saw that it was a reference to these were enlightened women. In other, these were women who spoke from deep practice, and reflecting on their practice and how it had changed their lives. So it's a wonderful book. I would say of all the books that are on the syllabus, that's the book that I would get if I had just one.
Okay.
Because there were others too, but
now to do the reading do I need a book or is it online?
That's a good question. I know that some of the syllabus is online. A lot of the syllabus is online. So
how do I access that? Is that in the?
That's on the link.
Okay, I'll figure it out. If I can't, I'll call Sheila. As I have her number,
Great.
she's easiest to call.
Yep, yep. Let me see.
Unless you want to give me your number.
Yeah, telephone, you want, here's my email. Sunny.
You'll send me an email with your email, Sunny?
You know what? Yeah, I did. Come to think of it, right? The email I sent you with the link has.
Oh, it has your email, right. So that's
right.
fine. I have your email.
Right. So that let me see.
If you're hesitant about being called, I can call Sheila. It's not a problem.
No, not at all. 347.
Yeah.
630.
Yeah.
5172.
And you're Sunny O'Neill.
Yes, SUNNY ONEIL. And
Got
Amy,
it.
what's the telephone number so that when it comes up,
646
646
467
467
4607.
4607. Okay, that's easy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. It's been lovely chatting. We haven't ever chatted before.
No, it's been very
I've
nice.
seen you and yeah.
You have a lot of experience. You have been to talk to a lot of people, and you've explored many. Seems
Well,
like
I'm quite old, so I started in Buddhism in 1985. No, actually in 1976, I was at Naropa.
wow.
And then did Shambhala training with Trungpa Rinpoche, and not Trungpa, but went to Naropa and he was there, and then did Shambhala training, then went to the Kala Chakra in 1985. And
was that the one that was in
blew
Wisconsin?
my mind. What?
Was that the one that was in Wisconsin?
No, that was in Recon in Switzerland. She talked about Recon. That's
Oh.
where it was. It was in Switzerland. Dalai Lama went to Recon.
Wow.
from
That's
Geneva.
amazing.
So I mean, I was, when she was saying that, I was thinking, anyway, that was, maybe it wasn't that time. Maybe he taught at Recon at other times, but so from 1985, before that, I up till during that time, I was a practicing Zen Buddhist. Also, I went to India with Thich Nhat Hanh in 1988 and 89. We traveled to all the Buddhist sites, and it was a small group of 15 Westerners and 15 Vietnamese. But I had been an old student of Thich Nhat Hanh's and of Tibetan Buddhism for a long time. And then in 1997, I adopted my daughter who's Tibetan. So we lived in Dharamsala for 15 years.
Wow.
So that's my more or less my
Incredible.
background.
What a background. Did you ever go and live in France when you were with Thich Nhat Hanh?
No, well, I went to Plum Village for a couple of summers I spent in Plum Village. I think 3 or more, maybe. I spent a winter there too, winter retreat. But
when did he found it? When did he found it, Plum Village? When did he found it?
Well, I don't know actually, but I think he came here. I met him in 1987, and he was here in 1965 at Columbia teaching poetry.
Oh my goodness.
He was on the staff at,
So he left Vietnam, and then
and then he went back, I think. I think he was here for a short time, a couple of years. I don't know how long. I don't really know exactly. But then he went back to Vietnam, and then during the war, and then he came out. I think after the war, he founded Plum Village. But the French were involved with Vietnam, so they were in Vietnam before we went into Vietnam, and so the languages part of the language is French in Vietnam, and it was natural for him to go to France.
That's, of course, yeah, of course. I never
And
thought of that.
but that was after the war. And he, during the war, he and Sister Chong Kong and two others had or maybe four others had this. They had an orphanage, and they were taking care of orphan children. And he was leading. He was hated by the North and by the South. Because he was advocating for peace. And so he was on neither side. And so he had to leave. His life was in danger.
Wow.
And then he went back, of course. He went to France, and then he finally went back in the, I don't know, in the 90s, maybe.
He's very sick now, right? He
had a stroke, a paralyzing stroke, and he doesn't speak. And he's always near death. Sometimes he stops eating, and that's been going on for maybe 10 years, maybe.
Wow.
Or 8 years, something like that. Maybe 5. I lose track. I'm sorry. I don't know, but he's very much in command of things. A group of senators and congressmen went to see him about 3 years ago. It was in the Times, and they were very impressed with his ability to communicate, and with him, but he doesn't speak.
Yeah. I can only imagine how, for a normal person, that kind of life is really hell. To be debilitated by a stroke so that you can't even speak. That's like imprisoned in your own body, But
I suspect for him, he's probably meditating, and he's probably, for him, it's
not hell. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean, is that, that's the,
for an ordinary person, it would be, is what you're saying,
Right. So one of the points of Buddhism is that we can develop beyond what an ordinary person would suffer from. And I think maybe Thich Nhat Hanh is developed enough so that he can.
He's
not right. I mean, I don't. So that
the picture that Jan Willis showed was the picture of he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King.
Yeah, that's
and that was the picture that. I think that was either the nominating picture or that's the picture of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you've been exposed to a lot of the history of Western Buddhism since.
I'm lucky. Yeah, I was very lucky. And what's your history? Sounds interesting. You sound like an interesting person, so it must be interesting.
I started practicing 5 years ago, so hasn't been.
And what brought you? What was your background before that?
I was just various, ups and downs in life.
It's usually suffering that brings people to Buddhism.
Yeah, really.
Everybody I know who's a Buddhist came to it that way.
Wow. So what do you feel about people who are not in a lot of suffering? Do you think they can make a connection to the Dharma?
Well, I actually came to it. I think I was suffering too. I wasn't aware, but I came to it from philosophy because I was looking for the meaning in life. I studied philosophy in college, and I couldn't find anything that was meaningful to me except, I spent half a year writing a paper on what it meant to live my life as a work of art based on Nietzsche, who said God is dead. So I was looking for something in Buddhism and in engaged Buddhism, the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh were, I grew up in the 60s, right? So the Vietnam War was when I was in college. And So we wanted peace. So they spoke of peace. So I went after them.
So you were one of the people, one of the protesters in the 60s who was really interested in protesting. I think 9 out of 10 when, you know, I was a baby boomer myself, and 9 out of 10, I think protesters went because that was the thing to do. You know, they
Really? But
Yeah.
we were in the beginning. This was 61. I was 60. My college years were 59 to 64. So
Okay.
so that was the very beginning, and
Right.
that my friends were burning their draft cards,
Yeah, wow.
and I went to the University of Michigan, and SDS started there, and the Peace Corps started there.
Wow.
Kennedy came and spoke about the Peace Corps there. I mean, there's a whole history of stuff
Wow.
there, and a lot of the people who were in the beginning of SDS were people who had gone to the South for civil rights. And so a lot of those leaders, before it became really radicalized, they were kind of like, I don't know, do you know the name Tom Hayden?
Yeah. He's
Yes.
whatchamacallit's husband, ex-husband, Jane.
He's
Fonda.
passed now. He's not Jane Fonda. He's not alive now. But he was the editor of the newspaper when I was a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back, that's when Kennedy had come in my sophomore year to Michigan and talked about the beginning of the Peace Corps. And we had a group called Americans Committed to World Responsibility. And he was one of the people, he organized, a group of us were researchers for what we thought the Peace Corps should be. And he drove a hearse to Washington to a conference at American University, and 18 of us went. But, you know, he was involved. So all those people were just students at that time. They were not, you know, you probably know him from 1968 when he was one of the Chicago Seven.
Right.
But then there were philosophical discussions when I came back in my senior year. I went away for my junior year. When I came back in my senior year, they were having philosophical discussions of SDS about peace.
Wow.
You
That
know?
must have been so interesting for you, since you were really kind of centered on, you know, the meaning of why we're here and should there.
Right. Well, we all were. I mean, that was
Philosophy.
my generation. I think your generation after.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe 10 years later, because I was born in 52. So.
And I was born in at the end of 41, so almost 42. So
Right.
10 years.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
so by 70, when I was 18, you know, it was already, there was in 72.
Everybody had dropped out. It was
or died, or, you know, it was. Yeah. And so, so the ideals were still there, but I think, you know, like maybe like the Dalai Lama says, if it's fueled by anger, something that's fueled by anger doesn't last. And so, you know, by 72, much of the impetus for the true reforming society and examining why we're living and stuff like that, that was gone, you know.
Well, that went because it seemed to me that it went because those of us in 1968 who wanted McCarthy got Humphrey, and we didn't vote for Humphrey because he was in support of the war, and Nixon came in. Once Nixon came in, everything ended.
Wow.
And that was 72.
Wow.
So, oh no, that was 68 when Nixon came in.
Yeah.
And so he was out in 73, I guess, was Watergate. But it was all over by 68 was the end.
It had been effectively suppressed.
Yeah, oh yeah, by the FBI
Yeah,
and the
you know,
CIA.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the rest of society supported the FBI and the CIA.
Well, it wasn't the rest of the society, but it was because Nixon was president and
Yeah.
because people out of protest didn't vote.
Yeah,
And Nixon, it wasn't that he was popular,
right.
but
He
but
did default.
we didn't vote. We
Right.
refused to vote.
Yeah.
And we thought that was, I never would do that again.
Well, you know, that's been that, you know, has been an effective tool for registering protest you know, sometimes. So, but oftentimes.
But I don't think it was anger that made it come to an end. I really think it was, but I think in a certain sense, anger, you're right, because there was a love-in.
Yeah,
after the anger.
I have to say that I disagree with you there, because like, who was it? Was it Margaret Mead who said that a committed group of people, even if they're very small, will change society? In fact, that's the only kind of group that's ever changed society, a committed group of small, you know, have you ever heard that quote from Margaret Mead? Okay, like she said that never doubt that a committed group of can change a society. A group of small committed citizens can change society. In fact, that's what always has changed society. And you know, it's really true. I mean, you know, the American Revolution, you know, the communism, you know, the Lenin and the early years of the Soviet Union, it's always been a core.
Hopefully it won't be QAnon. Hopefully.
I think QAnon is too ridiculed. It's you know, QAnon is just a kind of like a facade.
Or the ultra right. I mean,
yeah, the ultra right might using QAnon as kind of like as a distraction. But you know, they have that's the thing. That's why Trump was so worrisome, especially the election of 2020. Yeah. I mean, that's why, you know, getting out the vote there was so wonderful, you know, that because we learned, right? We learned that you do have to vote, that it really does matter. You know, I never thought it mattered, but it really does matter.
No, it's true. It's true.
So it was wonderful that Trump was so soundly defeated and that he's been exposed as being so foolish now. However,
we're not home safe. That's
right,
for sure.
He was just a symptom. There's the reason why Trump found a voice was that there were lots of people who wanted to hear him. That's the issue. And like you're saying, the ultra right, and now they're backed by, they have so much money and they have the courts, you know, and
I have to stop you because I was supposed to get a phone call at 9 o'clock and I'm realizing I just have to check and see if she called, because she goes to bed. And if I don't respond,
yeah. Let's end.
Let me just see if she called. No, she didn't call, fortunately. So I'm all right. I better make sure my phone is on so I can hear it.
Yeah,
so anyway, yeah. And so you were saying how you got involved and what your background is.
No, I wasn't saying. I changed the
You
subject.
weren't saying.
I changed the
you
subject.
Started. I asked if you're not interested in saying, that's okay.
Yeah, I'd rather not say.
Okay.
I've been practicing Tibetan Buddhism for 5 years. So, and then before that, I did have some exposure to Buddhism, but it was tangential. It was peripheral. I was suffering a lot. Let's put it this way. So.
But you sound very well educated. So I have no idea what you do or what you did or what.
I was a mother of 4 children. My husband passed away 5 years ago, and now I'm a widow and yeah, I have.
That's a suffering.
There was, yeah, definitely. So,
and you have 4 children. How old are?
between the ages of 40 and Crystal is 32 now. So they're
Wow.
grown up.
Grown up, yeah.
Yeah. My son is in Santiago, Chile, living there, and you know, yeah, Chile is not such a bad place to live, you know.
Well, it was.
It
Now
was
it's
under Pinochet, of course, under Pinochet in the 80s. But it's been traditionally one of the most stable, except for that period. You know, it was a period of
Allende was one of my heroes.
Ah, okay.
I
Yeah.
thought he was wonderful. I mean, he really was, he was pro-democratic, and he was, I mean, he was painted as not, but he was.
Interesting. Yeah.
And he was also, he really helped people who had nothing. And so he was able to he had a foot in both places. And politically, he was a Democrat, and people said he was, or I guess a democratic socialist, but he was a really good man as far as I knew.
Yeah.
But anyway, and our CIA
Yeah.
got rid of him.
Well, that's why we're no longer, behavior like that is the reason why the American century should have extended a lot longer, but it's being cut short because of stupid actions like undermining other governments for our own greed.
Do you watch Amanpour at night?
Yes. Yeah, I like her
Because
very much.
there's an interesting, tonight, I think where did we hear that? Was it Jan who said this about war?
What about war?
Who said this about war? I'm trying to remember where I heard it, that after each war, that we've had this backlash.
Oh.
And it was after the Civil War that, it's the ultra right. It was a thing on the ultra right, and that after, and I think it was and I can't remember. Maybe it was something on Brian Lara. I'm not sure, but it seems in history that after each major war, we've had a backlash of ultra right and fascist backlash.
Interesting, huh?
And we're I don't know what this last one was, but it seems like,
after this mess in Iraq, and after we thoroughly messed up the Middle East and Afghanistan, and now there is an ultra right. Well, you're right.
And after Vietnam, there was
Nixon?
an ultra right, and there was the bombing in it was on one of the Amanpour past Amanpour ones that I listened to. I think it was Fridays, if you can access it.
Yeah, so she interviews, or people who work with her interview other leaders, right? I mean, she used to be a reporter, an international reporter.
Yeah,
but now so
I can send you that one. If you want. I'll just forward it. Hang on a second. I'll forward it to you.
Terrific.
I just have to find it. Oh my gosh, I think it's too late for Joan. Okay.
Amy, I think let's get off, because maybe she's trying to get through, or maybe,
Yes, let's get off, but let me get this to you, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you'd enjoy it, but okay. So Amanpour, let's see. Okay, so this is from
from
Yes,
July. It would be July, what's today? Today's the 20th, 19th, 18th, 17th, 16th.
okay, it's called the White Power Movement, a direct line between Vietnam and January 6th. And I'm
Ah,
Well, turning
Uh,
now to the US.
you have to go down. It was Friday, but I'm sending you, I'll send it to you.
Rolling out a new strat.
I think I got it.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's the White Power Movement, a direct line between Vietnam and
Okay, so
January
you
6th.
don't need it, so I won't send it.
It's
the
18
link.
I have 18 minutes, the YouTube I found.
Yeah? All right, but it's also here.
Okay, could you send it to
So-
me?
Yeah, S-U, it's the whole name, right? Sunny
Oh,
O'Neill.
S is in Sam, U-N-N.
I have it
Okay,
at Shanti Deva, right?
yep.
Okay, so let me just send. Okay, that's it. If you scroll down, and then you just press video, play video.
Yep, I got it. I got your email. Okay,
Okay.
with
Oh, no, is that, yeah, it's play video, is that part of it?
Sadiq Khan, actually, is what I have.
In case you missed it, if you scroll down, it says, in case you missed it.
Right, watch video.
Yeah, and then that's it.
Okay.
Well, turning now to the US. The Biden.
Yep, this is it. Great.
Oh, enjoy.
Yeah.
So
I
it was
guess
nice
so.
chatting with you.
Wonderful.
And it's nice to know you, and have a good night.
Thank you very
thank
much,
you.
Amy. You too. And I hope you
Okay.
get in touch with your friend. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.